She found a name in a military database. A Marine, Medal of Honor recipient. Killed in action, Iwo Jima, 1945. David Fletcher. Then she looked up at her substitute teacher. Quiet, never talked about himself. Always wore the same old ring, and she saw the nameplate on his desk. Mr. T. Fletcher. Her hands started shaking. What she didn't know was that her teacher had been carrying his father's legacy for 68 years. In silence, this is the human stories. Drop your city in the comments below. And subscribe if you believe some legacies are too powerful to stay hidden. Because what happened next reminded an entire school that heroes don't always talk about their fathers. Sometimes they just become them. It was a Tuesday morning at Lincoln High School in Grand Island, Nebraska. Thomas Fletcher walked into room 214 before any student arrived. 68 years old, white hair neatly combed, worn khaki pants and a button-down shirt that had seen better decades, and a ring on his right hand. Old, scratched, faded. The kind of ring that carried history. He was a substitute teacher. Had been for 5 years. The school called him when they needed someone last minute. A teacher sick. A family emergency. And Mr. Fletcher always said yes. He arrived early. Never late. Set up the classroom. Wrote the lesson plan on the board in neat handwriting. Organized the desks. Made sure everything was ready. When the bell rang, students filed in. Some ignored him. Some said good morning. Most just sat down and waited. Mr. Fletcher didn't mind. He taught the lesson. Followed the notes left by the regular teacher. Answered questions when students raised their hands. Kept order without raising his voice. He was firm but kind, respectful. Patient. The kind of teacher students didn't remember. Because he never talked about himself. Never shared stories from his life. Never mentioned his past. Never brought up anything personal. He just taught, quietly, competently. And then he left. Students called him the quiet sub. Some joked he was probably a retired accountant. Or a farmer. Or someone who'd worked in a factory for 40 years. No one asked. And Mr. Fletcher never told. But there was one student who noticed something. Her name was Emma Carter. 16 years old. Junior year. Straightest student. President of the History Club. Emma had Mr. Fletcher 3 times that semester. Each time, she noticed the same things. The way he stood. Shoulders back. Posture perfect. Even at 60-8. The way he walked. Steady. Deliberate. Like every step had purpose. The way he held a pen. Fingers positioned exactly the same way every time. Muscle memory from something she couldn't identify. And that ring. Always on his right hand. She'd never seen him without it. One day, after class, Emma stayed behind. She approached his desk while he was erasing the board. Mr. Fletcher? He turned. Yes, Emma? I was wondering. That ring you wear. Does it mean something? Mr. Fletcher looked down at his hand. For a moment, his expression didn't change. Then quietly, he said, It belonged to my father. Was he in the military? Mr. Fletcher paused, then nodded once. Yes, he was a Marine. Emma waited for more, but Mr. Fletcher just picked up his briefcase. Have a good day, Emma. And he left. Emma stood there, staring at the empty doorway. Something about the way he'd said it, the way his voice had changed, the way he'd looked at that ring. She couldn't let it go. That night, Emma sat at her laptop in her bedroom. She had a history assignment due in 2 weeks. The prompt: research a veteran from your family or community. Write about their service, their sacrifice, their legacy. Emma didn't have any veterans in her immediate family. Her grandparents had passed away before she was born. Her parents were teachers. Her older brother was in college, but she kept thinking about Mr. Fletcher, about that ring, about the way he'd said he was a Marine. She opened a search engine, typed David Fletcher Marine Corps. Hundreds of results. Too many. She needed to narrow it down. She added, David Fletcher Marine Corps Medal of Honor. The screen loaded. And then, at the top of the page, a result appeared. From the Congressional Medal of Honor Society. Her breath caught. She clicked the link. The page loaded slowly. An old black and white photograph appeared. A young man in a Marine Corps uniform. Clean-cut, serious expression. Eyes that looked older than his face. The caption beneath read, Private First Class David Michael Fletcher, United States Marine Corps, Medal of Honor recipient. Killed in action, Iwo Jima, March 1945. Emma's heart pounded. She read further. For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty. Private First Class Fletcher, serving as a rifleman with Company E. 2nd Battalion, 28th Marines, 5th Marine Division. Distinguished himself during operations against enemy forces on Iwo Jima. On March 2, 1945, while his squad was pinned down by heavy machine gun fire, Private Fletcher exposed himself to enemy fire to draw attention away from his wounded comrades. He single-handedly engaged the enemy position, allowing his squad to evacuate casualties. Private Fletcher was mortally wounded during this action, but continued to provide covering fire until his squad reached safety. His extraordinary heroism and selfless devotion to duty reflected great credit upon himself and the United States Marine Corps. Emma's hands were shaking. David Fletcher, Medal of Honor, Iwo Jima, 1945. She scrolled down. There was more. Private Fletcher was 20 years old at the time of his death. He is survived by his wife, Margaret, and his infant son, Thomas. Emma froze. Thomas. Mr. Fletcher's first name was Thomas. She opened a new tab. Searched. Thomas Fletcher, Grand Island, Nebraska. Nothing useful. She tried again. Thomas Fletcher Marine Corps. Still nothing. But she didn't need confirmation. She already knew. The substitute teacher. The man who never talked about himself. The man who wore his father's ring. He was the son of a Medal of Honor recipient, and he'd never told anyone. Emma Carter had just discovered something no one at Lincoln High School knew. The quiet substitute teacher they barely noticed was carrying a legacy most people would never understand. But she didn't know what to do with it. And she was about to find out that some secrets are kept for a reason. The next morning, Emma didn't sleep well. She kept thinking about what she'd found. About Mr. Fletcher's father. About the Medal of Honor. About Iwo Jima. She thought about telling her friends. But something stopped her. This wasn't gossip. This wasn't something to spread around. This was personal. Sacred. But she also thought about her assignment. She needed to write about a veteran. And here was a story. A real story. A hero who'd given everything. She decided to ask. The next day, Mr. Fletcher was back. Substituting for the English teacher this time. Emma waited until after class. Once again, she stayed behind. Mr. Fletcher? He looked up from organizing papers. Emma, how can I help you? She hesitated, then took a breath. I have a history assignment. We're supposed to research a veteran. And I found something. About your father. Mr. Fletcher's hands stopped moving. He didn't look at her, just stared down at the papers on the desk. I found his Medal of Honor citation, Emma continued quietly. I read what he did. At Iwo Jima, the room was silent. Outside, students laughed in the hallway. Lockers slammed. But inside room 214, everything was still. Finally, Mr. Fletcher spoke. His voice was quiet, careful. Why are you telling me this? Because I want to write about him. For my assignment. But only if you're okay with it. Mr. Fletcher looked up. His eyes were wet. Not crying, but close. Why would you want to write about him? Emma's throat tightened. Because he was a hero. And because no one at this school knows. And I think they should. Mr. Fletcher stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. What do you need from me? Just tell me about him. What he was like. What you remember. Mr. Fletcher sat down in the chair behind the desk. He took off his glasses, rubbed his eyes, then put them back on. I don't remember him, he said quietly. I was 6 months old when he died. All I have are pictures, letters he wrote to my mother, and this ring. He held up his right hand. The old Marine Corps' ring caught the light. He mailed it to her 2 weeks before Iwo Jima, told her to give it to me when I was old enough. My mother gave it to me on my 18th birthday. Emma's eyes filled with tears. Did you join the Marines? Mr. Fletcher nodded. 1968. Served 3 years. Vietnam. Emma's breath caught. You're a veteran too. I am. But I'm not a hero. I did my job. Came home. That's all. That's not all, Emma said firmly. You served. You followed in his footsteps. Mr. Fletcher looked at her. For the first time since she'd met him, he smiled. Small, sad, but real. Write about my father, Emma. Tell his story. But not mine. Why not? Because his story matters. Mine doesn't. Emma shook her head. You're wrong, Mr. Fletcher. Your story matters too. 2 weeks later, Emma stood in front of her history class. She'd written a 15-page paper, researched every detail she could find, talked to Mr. Fletcher 3 more times, each conversation short, careful, but meaningful. She'd learned more than just facts. She'd learned about sacrifice, about legacy, about the weight some people carry in silence. Her teacher, Mr. Williams, stood at the back of the room. Emma, you're up. Tell us about your veteran. Emma took a deep breath. She'd prepared a slideshow. The first image appeared on the screen behind her. Private First Class David Michael Fletcher. The black and white photograph from the Medal of Honor Society website. The class went quiet. Emma began. On March 2, 1945, a 20-year-old Marine named David Fletcher saved the lives of 11 men on Iwo Jima. He was killed doing it. He never met his son. He never came home. But his actions that day are the reason 11 other Marines did. She clicked to the next slide. The Medal of Honor citation. Word for word. Students leaned forward. No one was on their phones. No one was talking. Emma continued. David Fletcher's son, Thomas, was 6 months old when his father died. He grew up with only pictures and letters. But when he turned 18, his mother gave him his father's ring. The ring David had mailed home 2 weeks before he was killed. She paused, looked around the room. And here's the thing. Thomas Fletcher became a Marine too. He served in Vietnam. He came home. And then he spent the rest of his life teaching. Quietly, never asking for recognition. Never telling anyone who his father was. One student in the front row raised her hand. Wait, are you talking about Mr. Fletcher? The sub? Emma nodded. The room erupted. Students turned to each other, whispered, shocked. Mr. Fletcher's dad won the Medal of Honor? And he was in Vietnam? Why didn't he ever say anything? Mr. Williams stepped forward. Class, settle down. He looked at Emma. Is this true? Emma nodded. I talked to him. He gave me permission to write about his father. Not about himself. But I think we should know both stories. Mr. Williams was quiet for a moment. Then he turned to the class. Does anyone know if Mr. Fletcher is in the building today? A girl near the window raised her hand. I saw him in the hallway. He's subbing for Mr. Garcia. Mr. Williams looked at Emma, then at the class. Wait here. He walked out. What happened next would change everything. Because sometimes the quiet ones don't ask for recognition, but they deserve it anyway. Mr. Williams walked down the hallway to room 118. He knocked on the door. Mr. Fletcher opened it. Behind him, students were working quietly on an assignment. Tom, can I borrow you for a minute? Mr. Fletcher looked confused. Is everything okay? Yeah, just come with me. They walked back to room 214. As they approached, Mr. Williams said quietly, Emma Carter did her presentation today. About your father. Mr. Fletcher stopped walking. She wasn't supposed to mention me. She didn't. Not really. But the students figured it out. Mr. Fletcher's jaw tightened. I should go. No, Mr. Williams said firmly. You should stay. Because these kids need to see you. He opened the door. The classroom was silent. Every student was standing. Mr. Fletcher stepped inside. His eyes scanned the room, landed on Emma. She was crying. Then, one by one, every student began to clap, not polite applause. Real, thunderous, from the heart clapping. Mr. Fletcher stood in the doorway, his hands at his sides, his face unreadable, but his eyes were wet. Mr. Williams walked to the front of the room. Mr. Fletcher, Emma just told us about your father, about what he did at Iwo Jima, about the Medal of Honor, and about you. Mr. Fletcher shook his head. There's nothing to tell about me. Yes, there is, Emma said, her voice shaking. You served too. You followed his path. And you've been teaching us for 5 years without ever asking for anything. That matters. A boy in the back row stood up. Mr. Fletcher, can I ask you something? Mr. Fletcher nodded. Why didn't you ever tell us? Mr. Fletcher was quiet for a long time. Then he said, because it wasn't about me. It was about him. And he didn't get to come home. So I didn't think I had the right to talk about it. Another student, a girl with glasses, spoke up. But you came home. And you became a teacher. That's not nothing. Mr. Fletcher's voice cracked. I just wanted to serve. Like he did. In a different way. Mr. Williams put a hand on his shoulder. You did, Tom. You have. The next week, Principal Hayes called an emergency assembly. The entire school packed into the gymnasium. Students sat in bleachers. Teachers stood along the walls. No one knew what it was about. Principal Hayes stepped to the microphone. Last week, a student in Mr. Williams' history class gave a presentation about a Medal of Honor recipient. A Marine who gave his life at Iwo Jima. His name was David Fletcher. The gym was silent. What most of you don't know is that David Fletcher's son has been teaching here for 5 years. As a substitute, quietly, without recognition, without ever mentioning his father, or his own service in Vietnam. Whispers spread through the crowd. Thomas Fletcher is here today, and I've asked him to join me on stage. Mr. Fletcher walked out from the side entrance. He looked uncomfortable, nervous, but he walked with his shoulders back. His head high. The students erupted in applause. Standing ovation, cheering, shouting his name. Mr. Fletcher stopped at the microphone. Principal Hayes handed it to him. For a moment, he just stood there, looking out at hundreds of faces. Students he'd taught. Students who'd never noticed him. Then he spoke. I didn't want this, he said quietly. I didn't want attention. I didn't want recognition. I just wanted to teach. The gym was silent. My father died when I was 6 months old. I never knew him, but I spent my whole life trying to be like him. I joined the Marines because of him. I served because of him. And when I came home, I became a teacher because I wanted to give back. In some small way, his voice cracked. He didn't get to come home. He didn't get to meet me. He didn't get to grow old. But because of him, 11 other Marines did. And those men had families. And those families had children. And those children had children. He looked out at the students. That's legacy. That's what service means. It's not about medals. It's not about recognition. It's about doing something bigger than yourself and hoping it matters. Tears ran down his face. Thank you for honoring my father. But please don't honor me. I'm just his son, trying to live up to what he did. The applause was deafening. 3 months later, the school held a dedication ceremony. They renamed the library after David Fletcher. A plaque was mounted near the entrance. In honor of Private First Class David M. Fletcher, USMC, Medal of Honor recipient, and his son, Thomas Fletcher, Vietnam veteran and educator. Heroes don't always seek recognition, but they deserve to be remembered. Tom Fletcher stood in front of the plaque. Emma Carter stood beside him. Thank you, he said quietly. Emma smiled. You taught me something, Mr. Fletcher, that the greatest heroes are the ones who serve without needing the world to know. Tom looked at the plaque, at his father's name, then at his own. For 68 years, he'd carried his father's legacy in silence, never asking, never telling Dot, but now the silence was broken, not because he'd wanted it, but because a student had cared enough to look. And sometimes that's all it takes, one person, one question, one moment of curiosity, Dot, to remind us that the quiet ones are often the strongest, Dot, that the ones who don't ask for recognition are the ones who deserve it. Most, Tom Fletcher never sought glory. He just wanted to be like his father, Dot, and in the end, he was, not because of what he said, but because of what he did. He served. He taught. He lived with honor, Dot, and that, more than any medal, is what makes a hero. So now, I ask you, have you ever met someone who served in silence? Someone who carried a legacy without ever asking for recognition? Someone who taught you something without you even realizing it? Say their name in the comments. Tell their story, because here at the Human Stories, we believe the greatest legacies are the ones passed down quietly, from father to son, from teacher to student, from generation to generation. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, subscribe and help us honor the voices that refuse to shout. We'll see you in the next story. And until then, remember, some heroes wear uniforms, some wear medals, and some just wear an old ring and teach in silence.